Hi, Sterling Allen here at the Extraordinary Technology 2011. It is July 29th, and yesterday Vernon Roth gave a very interesting presentation on hydroxy, Brown's gas, HHO technology, various names for those similar types of processes. And I talked about transmutation of elements toward the end, and that really got my interest. Everything he was saying was very fascinating. It's been a friend of mine for quite a few years, and we go back in our connections. So it's an honor for me today to do a recording of him. I'm going to be holding the camera. We've got a side room here so we can get some quiet. And just going to be asking him some questions about these technologies and the opportunities that are involved with these technologies. So you can read an interview, or this interview online will be posted at pesn.com. And a date close to this one, we'll be posting this to YouTube and however many segments it takes. So here's the interview with Vernon Roth. All right, Vernon, maybe you can just really quick tell us about your website and just a thumbnail sketch of a biography of what you do and where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, my first website is ancienttech.com, and that is my family's site to educate and sell our products that we developed by researching ancient technology and reproducing them in our world. There's different types of elements, different creams that we produced from ancient formulas, and they have healing effects and beneficial effects for the body. So check out Ancient Tech, that's TEK.com. I have another website, and I actually just took control of that again. It was very difficult to change anything or post anything. It's called Alchemical Hydrogen, and that's where a lot of the information that I presented yesterday and the information I'll be talking about is actually going to be posted, and I'll have videos up there and such as well, now that I have control of that to post up there.
And that's the subject that has me most intrigued. Obviously, there's a lot of things we could talk about. You've been involved in hydroxy research for years and have been chasing that dream along with a lot of other people, and have been working in concert with other people as well, and have been giving presentations at this Tesla Tech conference for years. But the alchemical hydroxy or hydrogen is fascinating. If I could recap it briefly, you were talking about taking the hydrogen and oxygen in the electrolysis process, and that somehow in your setup at least, you've been able to replicate the elements that are in the water in solution, whether they're minerals or even chemical. And they actually are replicated 10, 13 times in a given process. So you could actually make copies of whatever's in the water using this process. Did I summarize that pretty well?
Yes, you summarized that very well. That's what the research is showing now. It's kind of fantastical, but that's what we're actually experiencing, is this replication of minerals and multiplication.
I should tell you, too, that you're not the only one that says that. I've heard other people describe that phenomena, that the stuff that was in the Joe cell, and actually I should mention that it's the Joe cell setup using the hydroxy in the Joe cell where this shows up. Some research, Peter Stevens, I think, mentioned that, and others. I would say that there are at least 3 other people who have described independently that phenomena. So you were the first person to say that yesterday.
That's great. I'm really glad that we have independent corroboration in that area, because that's really exciting. I'm very happy to hear that.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm not just rolling my eyes saying I'll wait and see, because now that I've heard it enough, there's something to this, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing. And another thing that's exciting about what you're doing is you're willing to share this quite openly with people to help them do the same thing. So let's first talk about the kind of the lay of the land. Maybe take 5 minutes and describe how you do this and what's going on, what you have observed, kind of a snippet from your presentation yesterday at the Tesla Tech conference.
Well, I start with an essential hydrogen device that I follow the Bob Boyce method of using parallel stainless steel plates. and I input electricity in certain ratios into those plates, and I don't use for this process. I don't use sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide as a catalyst. I rely on the natural conductivities of different elements and the water that I work with to be the conductor of energy, and so it's not as efficient as a conventional hydrolysis cell. But we're not really looking for huge volumes of gas here. What we're looking for is the subtle energies, and that's my passion in the field of research, is the subtle etheric energy that we can start to imprint a pattern on and allow it to manifest into physical reality. And that's really what this comes down to, is finding these swirling vortexes of ether, putting a pattern into it, and finding the energy to make it a physical reality. And that's where I believe that's where the elements are coming from. And part of that is a huge portion of that is the separation of the oxygen and hydrogen and allowing that to recombine. So I know that there are people that experience transmutation of elements in the hydrogen gas flame, but now we're starting to actually see that in the hydrogen chamber as well. So that's what's really exciting. My process uses stainless steel plates, and we have to vary the current and voltage ratios a little bit, but we can talk about the minutiae of the process a little bit later. I use the stainless steel plates and put energy across it, and what happens is elements that are present already in the liquid start to condense and drop out at the bottom of the device. So it's very important that the stainless steel plates are not locked in a solid case, but actually have room for liquid to flow around and the elements to fall down in, because that's where they accumulate, and then you can draw them off over time as they develop. So that's the basic principle. And then I'm very much safety oriented, so I'm not using a giant mason jar or something like that. I've blown up too many cells to play around with plexiglass. I use half-inch to three-quarters-inch thick PVC pipe and stainless steel plates to hold everything together, and so it's a very safe device. So that's what I use in particular. And then actually, instead of using regular electric power from the wall or from a generator, I actually just hook it up to a solar panel and plug it in.
300 watts, right?
Yeah, 300 watts will give you about a significant amount of gas production. My first initial experiment, I was getting 20 liters an hour off of a $45 solar panel from Harbor Freight, and it was only generating in the neighborhood of 100 watts or so. So it was kind of exciting to actually see elements being developed, a usable byproduct of hydrogen gas that we can burn later, just coming from the sun with the minimum of expenses. So it's really exciting.
So describe the process of you've got something in solution, a mineral, that is being duplicated.
Well, I've actually done this in another way. I do it all the time in another way, based off of an ancient technology that we discovered. And the process is you have a stream of hydrogen and a stream of oxygen gas. And if you have a crystalline matrix of whatever element that you are reproducing to form, and then you have etheric energy, an accumulator that you direct the energy through the crystalline matrix, pattern the ether, and that flows into the hydrogen and the oxygen. Then you have a spark there to combine that hydrogen and oxygen, and because you've just patterned the energy that is there, the hydrogen and oxygen form into the element that you're after. This kind of flies in the face of conventional physics and...
Kind of?
Well, okay, it flies in the face of conventional physics, but, we're going to discover that we don't really know a whole lot. I mean, even this last year, conventional physics was turned on its head by a couple of discoveries when they learned about the interaction of light and magnetism. And they said, and they admitted in the scientific journals, they said, we don't understand why this happens. All of our mathematics say that we should be getting X number of energy, but we're getting orders of magnitude higher than that, just with the interaction of light and magnets. So conventional physics and our conventional understanding of reality is not complete, and anybody who says it is just a little arrogant there. So we have to understand that there's more to know than what we know right now, and we have to be open to the information as it comes in. So, and I actually challenge everybody that sees this to experiment with this and find out if I'm right. Find out if the other people that are reproducing elements and seeing the transmutation are actually correct, because I would like to know, and I want the proof out there, and I want people playing with it, because as we do the experiments, someday conventional science will catch up, and this will become commonplace. And 100 years from now, or maybe less than that, let's hope, they'll actually use processes or this understanding to make the things that we need, and we won't have lack, and we won't have mining as we understand it now. We will actually use energy to create matter. I mean, we're talking Star Trek technology here, but that's the future, and the people that wrote that were visionaries. So that's my goal. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Just conceptually, this is a variation of the 3D printing that they're talking about, where you put something into an AutoCAD machine and it'll actually print out a 3D rendering of a device that you can then use. It's a practical device.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
the difference being that you're not printing something from a set of plans, you're actually on a nano or molecular level, you're reproducing a given substrate. That's so you're making a copy of gold. You're making a copy of some expensive mineral or some expensive molecule. It doesn't have to be mineral, right?
That's right. Actually, the way I knew that I was actually reproducing something was I was doing an experiment with an alchemical fluid that I make that takes quite a long time to make and is quite an intensive process. And when I put that into the machine and started finding that the fluid was actually that more of the fluid was coming out the other end than I started with, and it was stronger and better than what I started with, that's when I knew that I wasn't just reproducing a single element or a single mineral. I was actually reproducing a complex. It was actually quite a complex reproduction, and was not just limited to a single atom template. So that was very, very exciting for me to discover that, because it means that I have a whole lot less work to do in certain areas, because it's very difficult to produce that. But also that gives me a whole new responsibility as we work. Well, you know what? That's a psycho-spiritual observation that we won't go into here in the technology world, but it's very exciting. It's very exciting to know that we don't just reproduce a single element. We can actually reproduce complex elements using energy.
You described a number of 10 to 13 times the amount of the original substrate being reproduced in this process. Do you want to describe how you came up with that number?
Well, that was done by some friends that were doing Joe cell research, and they had the conventional stainless steel tubes. They put in a mineral toddy, Clark's minerals, organo minerals. There's different types of minerals. They put in a mineral toddy into this Joe cell device, which is a very powerful etheric energy accumulator as well as generating hydrogen. And they were able to, through a series of boiling or generating hydrogen and oxygen, recombining it and starting the process all over again, they were able to actually multiply the mineral content by 13 times. And I don't know exactly where I'm at, but with my experiments, but it's a significant number up there as well, that the minerals that you start with stay in suspension, but as the longer you run, there are minerals that there are deposits built up at the bottom of a Joe cell or my device that get thicker and thicker, even though the original fluid still has all the original mineral level in it. So you take that off and put more water back into it, and you just keep on building up the elements. And the longer you do this, the more you can multiply them. So I haven't found a limit yet, but my experimenting is very, very new. I started this year thinking that I was going to give a lecture strictly about the different uses of hydrogen in fuel supply, heating and cooking, and waste remediation. And then in the process had this discovery and realized this is really, really important and needs to get to people. So I changed my presentation significantly and brought this here. That's why it's an emerging technology, and it's something new that people can experiment with. But I felt like it was really important, so that's why I brought it here to present.
You have some associates, you talked about some other people, the 13-fold increase.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do you know who have been able to replicate this?
Doing this on purpose, there aren't very many people. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that have discovered this on accident, but doing this on purpose, no. There's not very many people. There are actually, we're actually into the borderline alchemical field, which I've seen some amazing things this last year in, and they do create elements all the time. They just don't talk about it, and they have a different system they have a different system than we're using here, but it is a reality.
Historically, you talked about you own this domain name alchemicalhydrogen.com, and you've had that domain for quite some time, and yet this particular aspect is a new discovery. What was alchemical hydrogen before this discovery?
I was using, and I still use hydrogen to alchemically destroy waste products, and I was using hydrogen to in internal combustion engines to eliminate the exhaust and the VOCs and the unburned hydrocarbons, to keep people from being exposed to that, as well as just having the engines run cleaner. And I use the word alchemical hydrogen because, and we're getting into a strange field, but my life, I was led to study alchemy, and I learned about I studied all the ancient techniques of alchemy to not only create elements but purify the human body and expand and clean out the consciousness per se. And then I was led to apply that, then I was led to develop hydrogen technology. Then I married the two together, which is that's why I called it alchemical hydrogen, because I was using alchemical fluids in the production of hydrogen to get really phenomenal hydrogen. And there's many types of Brown's gas, and there's some is high purity, some is low purity, and the different purity levels have different uses. So if you have really high purity, you can vaporize anything, and you can destroy tungsten, and you can remediate radiation and such. But you can't do that with a low level of Brown's gas. You can't do it with a low energy. But the low energy Brown's gas has different uses. You can use it for cooking. You can use it for different applications that you couldn't use the super powerful vaporizing and imploding level of Brown's gas. So by applying alchemical fluid to this, I could get high level Brown's gas without the conventional without the conventional resonance and the electrical circuits and stuff like that. I could generate the high level Brown's gas without using the expensive equipment. Or I could vary the levels of the fluids and get the low level Brown's gas that I could use for other processes. So that's why I called it alchemical hydrogen, because I was using this fluid in different locations and such. So that's where the name came from.
Okay. Well, I think it's fortuitous that you grabbed that domain name and now you have this totally new process that I think fits the name even better, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Except it's not just hydrogen, it's hydrogen and oxygen from a Brown's gas process, but that's a good name still.
It is. There's actually 4 times the amount of oxygen than there is hydrogen, so, 4 times the volume, excuse me.
Yeah.
But yes, it is fortuitous. I'm very glad that it happened.
In terms of rolling this out into a practical application where people can actually do this on a commercial scale, How close do you think you are, or someone could be that you could, and you're willing to train people. You're willing to, somebody comes along and say, hey, could you show me how to do this? You're glad to do it.
Yeah, I am.
And you're very sharing that way. It's really quite phenomenal. I would plug in here, though, something I don't think Vernon would say, that if he does help you, make sure you remember him in any kind of, revenue that you're making on this, that you volunteer some kind of royalty that goes back to him to help his research, because this is just one of many things that he's playing with. He's extremely prolific as an inventor and an intuitive in the scientific field. And so I think he deserves that kind of sustainment. But answer the question of how close and what would it take to, there's obviously a whole bunch of different applications of this, but what would be the low-hanging fruit, and how hard would it be or easy would it be to get to that low-hanging fruit?
Well, the easiest way to go about this would be to have to just create a little device, and these things could go into a 5-gallon bucket if you wanted to be really low tech and put it together. Or like I do, I use the heavy duty CPVC plastic and stainless steel. But the easiest way to do this would be to just build a device and hook it up to a solar panel and start dropping out the elements and finding an avenue that you could sell it or use the elements in some way. So I'm very much into people being self-sufficient. So let's say you, Sterling, wanted to set this up at your house, and you could start generating power, and you've got a little shed in the backyard hooked up to and you've got a solar panel mounted on it. Then you just be using the sun, using a passive energy source to develop a monetized stream. Okay, let's just say that. And so you have that set up at your place, and your neighbor can have one set up. To actually put it into a production level, I'm not a huge fan of big corporations getting control of things, and they don't like to have anything that they don't, have an iron-fisted control over. So, but if you had a group of people that could put it into production, you'd have a piece of property with a bunch of solar panels set up and a bunch of hydrogen devices there that are just generating the elements and generating a usable energy source. So that's the probably the fastest way and the easiest way to start to move this into the production level that you talked about.
You were talking about taking a chemical type of element, a molecule that you had developed, and you found it showing up in large quantities, and that was an indicator to you that something was happening reproduction-wise or alchemical-wise. How hard would it be to isolate these things once you've created them?
Well, it's just a matter of on an individual level, it'd be a matter of some chemistry. I have a friend that takes our alchemical gold and uses a little bit of chemistry process on it and creates gold chloride, which he then sells to a chemical company. Gold chloride is an industrial. It's what we call a precious chemical. If you're working with precious metals, to actually create a revenue stream, it's easier to work with precious chemicals rather than precious metals, because they're at least 4 times more expensive than the metals. So if you're working with gold chloride, it's not $1,600 an ounce. It's in the neighborhood of $6,000 for an ounce for high purity gold chloride. And it's funny because the process of dropping gold out from a mining process, you go through the gold chloride stage and then you go into the yellow metal, and everybody wants the yellow metal, but that's gold fever. If you stick with the gold chloride, you have a completely different level of monetary income. Same thing with silver. Silver's let's say silver was $10 an ounce. Silver nitrate or some of the different precious chemicals from silver actually are 4 times that amount. 4 to 10 times that amount if you can create the right type, and people chemists sell that and make a significant amount of money, more than the metal itself. So the process of dropping out these elements would be to find the proper place to move it, and that would involve a little bit of chemistry and selling it to chemist shop. Or you could use I hadn't thought of this before. You could use an electroplated process and plate this metal onto a substrate, and then just sell that, and there wouldn't be chemistry involved at all. So there's different ways. Not being an actual chemist, I haven't explored all those options. Just been really busy, working with the technology. So,
but people turning this into a cottage industry could find a local substance that's expensive that they could implement into this process to replicate it. Yes. and sell it locally.
We're suffering from a huge, and people don't know about it very much yet, but we're actually suffering from a huge deficiency in the rare earths right now. Mm-hmm. Rare earths are very important for the rare earth magnets, but also the batteries that are being developed.
The neodymiums, for example.
Exactly, and so if you can create a stream of the rare earths, those elements, then you'd be sitting pretty. That would actually be a much better way to go than worrying about the elements, gold and such, because from an alchemical's perspective, I have to throw this out there, an alchemist is forbidden from making a profit with gold. They can use it to further their research, they can use it to keep themselves alive, but if they try to elevate their status in life with gold, they will be. It'll end. Some of them die, some of them are severely punished by the universe.
So it's like a spiritual calling, so to speak, to be an alchemist.
Absolutely.
And you can't be in it for greed, you can't be in it for control or manipulating. If your motives are pure, then you can be an alchemist. So it's a warning about getting into alchemy, that you have to be a good person and stay that way.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk.
I could actually talk even more about that, but that gets really esoteric. But I've seen some things this last year that are really interesting, but we won't talk about that. We can talk about that another time.
Okay. Let's talk about what kind of process you would be looking at to get set up. Just first of all, to replicate it, to prove to yourself that this is real. What's the expense of materials and time to replicate and to see that the effect does work?
Well, first thing is you start out with stainless steel plates.
316?
I always work with 316 stainless. There are other materials and different things that you can play with, but the most readily available 316 stainless in, I like 6x6 squares, but whatever you're working with, whatever size material vessel you're working with. So I use 8.5-inch nominal CPVC pipe and seal it closed with these things inside. So 6x6 works pretty well for that.
And you have these here with you at the conference. Maybe what we could do is after this episode, we could have you actually pull it apart and show us the different components in it. Mm-hmm. Could we do that?
Yeah, we can do that. And we can videotape some of the devices themselves, and you can take a look at them.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
So, estimate about how much money would the components cost, materials?
Well, just to start out to play with it, probably figure about $150. You've got to cut the stainless steel plates. I have some. If somebody wants to, I have a whole bunch of them of the 6x6 squares. If somebody wants to buy some, I just have just the money into the shearing of it. But if you guys want to just buy stainless steel plates and shear them off, that's whatever. If you've got a machine shop local that can do that, that works pretty well.
Back in my Joe Cell days, when I was really focused on that, there was quite a bit of talk about when you cut the metal that you get some magnetization of the metal going on. Do you have to be careful about that kind of stuff?
Using a conventional Joe Cell, which has the concentric stainless steel tubes, you do have to worry about that. That's actually fairly easy to overcome with Brown's gas, because you can heat it and take out the magnetism. shearing it or cutting the shapes out with a water jet is because I use flat parallel plates instead of the concentric stainless steel tubes, because I can control the distances much better. So when you shear them, there's less of an issue with that. Plus, there's magnetism, there's paramagnetism, and then there's diamagnetism. And so a couple of the free energy devices that I've seen actually relies upon a ratio between the three levels of magnetism, both paramagnetism, diamagnetism, and magnetism, in varying ratios. And when they were able to tune the machines to not just the components, but everything around the machine to the ratios of more paramagnetism than the others, but different ratios, they were able to achieve free energy. So some amount of magnetism is good. I haven't actually run into an issue where the magnetism in the system is a detriment right now, because I don't work with the conventional, the concentric stainless steel tubes. So. And
the concentric tubes are usually what you see in a Joe cell. So a Joe cell is not necessary for this. It's one of the things where it shows up, but it's not necessarily a crucial component.
Let me back up here. The conventional Joe cell that we see, which is the concentric stainless steel tubes, is one type of Joe cell. If you look at the books that have been written on Joe cell technology, and I actually gave a lecture on this about 5 years ago, if you look at the books and the information on that, what you're really looking for is certain types of materials interacting with other types of materials. So you're looking for metallic, and this also goes back to orgone research. You're looking for metallic versus natural materials. Some Joe cells, I have a battery. It literally looks like a battery. It's made out of brass plates and a different type of fluid in there, and it conforms to all the rules of a Joe cell. It's just not made out of a concentric tube or like the Mojo cell, a sphere, which is really fun to play with. But it actually conforms to all the rules of the Joe cell. Certain ratios to height, to width, and the fluid in there versus the metal that it's interacting with. So there are different types of Joe cells. The concentric tube is only one of them. So.
Is this going to be a science where you can follow a recipe like, for example, if you were to mass produce something like this, you can make it the same way every time and it works the same way every time? Or is there something that goes into the materials where you require a gift to do some tuning, an alchemical gift, for example?
I haven't run into that, actually. In this aspect, it's behaving the same way each time. And I'm not running into, times of day. I'm not running into the attitude of the operator, which I have machines that are that work absolutely contingent on the attitude and the spiritual mindset of the operator. But this is behaving in a little bit different way, and I think it's a refinement of the process that allows us to focus the energy without worrying too much about the outside extraneous input. Now, I can't rule out the zodiacal signs or where the moon is, which is actually very important.
In some processes.
In some process, it's important in a lot of scientific processes. They cannot machine the plutonium cores for nuclear bombs or nuclear reactors. They cannot machine them under certain signs of the moon, because if they do, the metal will literally change dimensions as the moon shifts. They have to machine them under certain signs that are what they call fixed. Otherwise, the metal will change dimensions and not work properly.
And this is talked about in people who are in that industry.
It is a little known fact in the industry. Yes.
Something they don't dare talk about to most people,
because it kind of flies in the face of conventional physics. So That's a very strange and very little known secret of the nuclear industry.
I understand people who make automobile parts, or like engines, for example, for race cars, that when they can make 3 engines under seemingly identical circumstances, but they have to test each one of them because they don't actually function the same.
That's amazing.
And it has to do with when they were made, and there's really no such thing as 2 identical scientifically made things, because there are other phenomena going on. It's not just humans that are responsive to astrological types of influences, that materials also have an input. But you're saying
I believe that absolutely.
In this particular process, you haven't noticed yet that kind of influence.
Well, I haven't noticed that yet on a macrocosmic scale. That may be happening on a microcosmic scale, but I haven't noticed it on a macrocosmic scale.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because when I was in studying electrical engineering, they told us the same thing about things like solar panels and integrated circuits, and they actually have to put in they actually have to engineer in adjustments so that they can tune something into the behavior pattern that they want. And from a religious perspective, we see that all energy has consciousness. And if we're working with certain types of energy, we have to understand that the consciousness of that energy is going to come into play. But on a macrocosmic scale, with this hydrogen system that I've been working with, and we're not seeing a lot of influence in that regard, which makes me happy, because it means that everybody can work with it and everybody can play with it. So that's exciting.
So it may not be necessary that the person have an alchemical calling, so to speak, to do this. Or how important do you think that would be?
Well, you know, we're going to find out in the next 6 months, because I'm very much alchemically oriented, and so I'm probably not the norm of the people that are going to be working with this. Mm-hmm. I learned something very interesting. Conventional engineering deals with the bell curve. Okay, mm-hmm. They want to know what goes on in this normal space. Okay, and they plot all their diagrams and everything, and they create bell curves because they want to understand what goes on in this normal space. And I realized that is so far outside of my keen of understanding, because I don't care what goes on there, because that's normal. I want to know why this little spike occurred over here. I want to know what goes on outside of the norm. So that's funny, a funny way to look at it, but that's where I'm at.
And turn that into a new norm.
Mm-hmm.
Hone in on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we didn't finish the question about what would be involved in getting started in this, just on a replication basis, to prove to yourself that it works. We talked about materials. What about time?
Well, if you're mechanically or if you're hands-on oriented, about a week to put this all together.
A week full-time or tinkering time?
A week tinkering time, yeah.
Hobby time in the evening when you come home from work?
Yeah, exactly. Hobby time and just playing around with it. You can sit and put together the plates pretty easily. There are certain rules you have to follow, and so you don't say this is the thing about working with hydrogen. You follow the rules until you understand the rules and you learn where you can break them. Okay, but when you first start out, you reproduce things exactly the way they were made before. Mm-hmm. Once you understand the rules, then you can start experimenting outside of the rules.
Do you have on your website some kind of a set of plans to...
No, nothing's... I just have a few pictures up there right now.
Mm-hmm.
I literally barely got control of that website again from the person that was running it before. So, real good guy, but he kind of disappeared down in Mexico and is exploring the ancient ruins down there, which makes it very difficult to, run a computer and upstate websites. Yeah. So I just got control of that so I can start changing the content again.
Okay. And do you want to give your contact information, or can people go to the website to get that?
People can go to the website. The easiest way to contact me is either through Facebook or my email. Earth's Ransom at yahoo.com. That's EARTHSRANSOM at yahoo.com. Or just look me up on Facebook, and I communicate that way pretty easily too.
Okay.
So those are the easiest ways.
Yeah, I tempted to bring up what you posted on Facebook the other day about a 6-foot rattlesnake.
Oh. Well, you know, I have been blessed with different messengers through my life, and I was attacked by a 6-foot rattlesnake the other day. That was a pretty interesting experience. It struck at me twice and missed both times. So it's a beautiful little miracle that I'm here, and but that was a sign of change. And actually, in retrospect, that was an interesting little warning that I received. So I'm glad that it happened. You know, I did have to kill the rattlesnake, but because it was very aggressive and was not just, you know, hanging out by himself and doing nothing, he was actually very aggressive. So it was an indicator that certain things were changing for me. So, which happens. The last time was a bear, 5 years ago, broke into my house, teaching me an interesting lesson that I had to learn. So
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else in this particular sector that we haven't talked about that ought to be brought up?
You know, I'm sure there is, but as you know, when we start looking at the machine and such, I'll start thinking of more stuff that needs to be presented. But yeah.
All right. So let's do that as part 3.
Okay.
And we'll stop this segment for now.
All right. Sounds good.
Hi, Sterling Allen here. We're at the Tesla Tech Conference 2011 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, July 29th. And I'm with Vernon Roth here. This is actually the second part of a 2-part video series. The first part, we'll have a link there in the bottom in this YouTube video where you can see where he described this alchemical process where in his electrolysis scenario, he's found that some of the elements that are in the water in certain electrolysis scenarios are duplicated, whether they're minerals or whether they are chemicals, chemical compounds. And the question I didn't ask him was, what about molecules like insulin, for example? He found that elements that are within the water are duplicated, so that if you start with one part, in some cases he saw with the cycling of the water, they actually had 13 times as much of that element at the end than they had at the beginning. And this is true with gold particles, and with some fairly complex chemical compounds that he described. That's in part A. We went through all that, kind of the philosophy behind it, and this video here is to describe the apparatus. He's actually agreed to go ahead and take things apart and show us exactly how he makes this. Not exactly. I mean, this is going to be fairly technical, but you know, it's not like he's going to show you, you know, A to Z. But he is going to give us a good overview going through each component. And now that I've given that explanation, I would like to go ahead and turn it over. I'm going to go ahead and control the camera. But I'd like Vernon to recap what I just said in his words to begin with, and then we'll cut this video into however segments we need to as part B of this series. Okay?
All right, let's go for it. Well, thank you, Sterling, and thank you for everybody for being here. And we're going to move on forward. So I think that one of the most important things that we can do with our energy and for the future is to find out more and better ways to use water in our world. And that's really a huge portion of my research, as many of you have experienced the spark of life water and its various incarnations and what it's used for. That's really my driving force, is to find out different ways to use water in the world. And so that's what I do with hydrogen. And I make hydrogen and oxygen from electricity and water. So that's what we're talking about here. And this is a basic cell. This is what we call a dry cell.
Hey, before you get into that, this is actually take 2. The first one we thought the camera was rolling and it wasn't.
Right.
Tell us about what happened with after you gave your presentation, two people came up to you.
Yesterday, after I gave my presentation, two people independently came up to me and said, we also have experienced the multiplication of elements that we did not expect at all using energy, magnetic fields, and geometrical structures. And it's occurring on a much smaller scale than what we're experiencing here, but it is occurring. And so they said, we are so glad that someone else talked about it, because now we know that we're not crazy. Now we know that this is actually reality. So it's very exciting stuff, and this is I feel like it's going to be happening more and more. And many people may already actually be doing it, not knowing what's going on. So with that said, we will start with hydrogen. And why don't we start where I started? And what we have over here is a conventional. It uses some principles of Bob Boyce's work with hydrogen. It uses some principles of George Wiseman and Ewell Brown's work with hydrogen. It's a simple hydrogen cell with parallel stainless steel plates in it. You input 120 volts DC, and this is not supposed to be in there. And the gas comes out of the hydrogen unit, goes into the reservoir, which acts like a trap and an expansion chamber to trap vapors. And then the gas feeds from the reservoir into a first stage bubbler, this is a safety bubbler, and it also serves as a wash for the gas to wash off any sodium hydroxide. And then the gas escapes out the top. And this little hose you see down at the bottom is the water feed to the hydrogen device. So gas and a little bit of water comes out here, and the water returns to the bottom and fills the device. This is a small device. Not a very small device, but it's a simple device. Excuse me. And this was commissioned by a friend of mine to help run his diesel generator on his mountain retreat. And it uses a set of solar panels. About 1,000 watts of solar panel goes into this and boosts his diesel engine. Once it leaves that bubbler,
just on a tangent, what kind of improvements does he see on the diesel generator using that?
Well, what we calculated was that because there is no parasitic drag from an alternator to feed his engine, using this and one other piece of technology that's not mine, so I can't talk about it, but it's a passive device, we calculated that he will get about a 90% boost in his diesel generator system. So solar power. It's
almost a double of his.
Almost a double, absolutely.
And that's taken into account the wattage from the solar panels.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's like a voltage multiplier. You were using water instead of and we're using water and hydrogen. That is not what you're going to get if you have a parasitic drag and you're running it off of your own generator. That's just with the solar panels. But he found that it was cheaper for him to do that and use a generator as his existing power source than it was to install a big solar system with batteries and all the electrical components that would go along with that. This is more plug and play for him, and he likes that. So that's what this one is built for.
With 1,000 watt solar panel, he was able to power his house.
1,000 watts and a diesel generator.
And a diesel generator, right.
And a diesel generator.
Right, so he's running his house on the diesel generator with a 1,000 watt solar panel.
Right, essentially.
Okay.
And 10% of the normal fuel.
Is this augmenting, so he's also plugged into the grid, or is he off grid?
He will be off grid once he goes this way, because his electricity will be cheaper with this method than it will be off of the conventional grid system. So this is also what I brought to show a simple system, the most simple system that you can create. Hydrogen device, reservoir, bubbler. And this is very safe, and it's excuse me, and it's got a lot of safeties built in, especially at the end when the hydrogen comes out of there and goes into here. This is our flashback arrestor and the last line of defense for this system, which it's filled with water and it bubbles through it, and then the gas goes to the generator. And if we were running a torch, we were going to run a torch, say for welding in a welding shop, one more system would be installed here, and that is this flashback arrestor.
And this is something off the shelf?
This is something off the shelf. You buy them for $40 to $60 a pair. You get it at any welding shop. I highly recommend it.
And it's called a flashback arrestor?
It's called a flashback or a sparkback arrestor. They use them for oxygen and acetylene torches, as well as hydrogen torches as well.
Now,
so that's what I recommend.
On this system down here, are you using any kind of conditioning of the DC that's coming into it? Are you using
No, we're not. It's straight line DC. And I went with straight line DC because it's easier to work with. The only current control that I put in the system is the number of plates and the concentration of catalyst. When I started working with this, I started working with electronic gizmos and the pulse width modulators and all that. Burned them up pretty quick in my experimental phase and realized I wanted something a little bit more foolproof. And so I developed a way of calculating number of plates to the current ratios that I wanted, and also the catalyst, the amount of catalyst in the system can help control the current flow.
Did we go over those numbers this morning?
We have not yet, and so I was gonna outline that because I can illustrate it very easily with these.
Okay.
But essentially, I'll just give you the numbers right now. Maximum 2.23 volts per cell. Maximum 1/4 1/4 amp per square inch of plate surface. So for instance, we have a 6x6 plate here, so that's 36 square inches. And if we were using the 6x6, not including the ring in here, just ignore that. If we were using the 6x6 plate, putting current across that, our limit would be 9 amps because, excuse me, 9 divided by 36 is, of course, 4. So that's our 1/4 amp per square inch. That's the maximum amount. I actually like to run about if using that plate, I like to run about 5 amps, just to make certain that there's a nice margin of safety there.
So whether you had 2 plates or 100 plates, you go based on one surface. You're not going to exceed this cell system.
That's right.
By 9 amps.
That's right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this system, we'll get into that. So we've got. If we were using these plates, we would go 9 amps. Since we've actually cut off surface area in this device, I go less than 9 amps. And then we go to 2.35 volts or 2.34 volts per cell. So there's
more than 2.3.
No more, because you'll start to burn up your plates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells in there. So you would not go more than 14 volts.
Okay, for the layperson, I'm seeing 24. Yeah. So what are you calling a cell?
This is a double unit. Okay, there's a negative plate in the center, and a positive plate on one side and a positive plate on the other. So what you're actually seeing is two sets of hydrogen, a 2-stacked hydrogen device.
And so going from this side to this side, what are you calling a cell?
The cell is the different distance between plates. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells in there. And then we go to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 6. Yeah, that's 6.
Okay.
6. So there's 6 on each side with a negative center.
So there's a positive and a negative.
Positive on the outside.
2 sets of positive and negative. 12 pieces of metal makes a 6-cell plate.
Yeah, okay. And this appears to be the conventional cell that you can buy on almost any hydrogen cell device, but it's not, and we'll get into the difference. But we have 2 inputs: fuel in, or excuse me, water in, hydrogen out.
13.
What's that?
13.
Say what?
13 plates.
Yeah, there's 13 plates there.
Oh, there's 13 pieces of metal?
Yeah,
okay.
13 pieces of metal. Negative in the center, and you can see I slip on a little
negative or neutral?
Negative.
You call it neutral?
Neutral are the ones in between the negative and the positive.
Okay.
You just put on a little spade connector on the bottom, slip it on, and then the positive go up there on a little spade connector on the edges. I sell this for $300. This is actually my breather unit. I use this to breathe Brown's gas, but we'll get into that as we move forward. So that is the essential. That is essentially what we're dealing with here. Only on that one, it's a larger scale. So there's 60 plates in that device with a nice little water jacket on either side to make certain things stay cool. And 60 plates takes 120 volts, so that's 2 volts per cell. So, or thereabouts. And on that one, we're dealing with a little bit larger plates, so I can actually go up to 12 amps per excuse me, 12 amps for the whole unit, because the plates are actually larger.
So for the voltage, it's additive for the number of cells.
That's right.
And for amp, it's based on the surface of one single cell.
That's right.
As far as what max.
We're in a series system, so it's the amperage is based off of one plate versus the voltage being based off of the entire set of plates.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of the technicalities that we go into with this type of hydrogen device. And these are rules that have been tried and proven many times. If you go over amperage, you'll start to crystallize your plates and they won't produce gas very well. If you go over voltage, you'll start to break down your plates, and you don't want that.
And let me ask you just quickly, talking about the alchemy principle that we were talking about this morning. Of these two systems, have you achieved what we're calling alchemy, or the multiplication of elements within the water in either one of these or both?
In these two systems, we do. That system, I don't want that to happen. I don't want minerals or elements to multiply because there's no real way for them to get out. This system is a standalone system. I have systems like that have been running for years.
So we'll want to talk about when you don't want it, what to do to prevent it.
Right. Well, what you do to prevent it is use distilled water and sodium hydroxide. And a few little catalysts. You buy my electric water, throw that in there. That can eliminate what we call CO2 soaking. CO2 soaking is when your hydrogen device runs down and the plates are covered with a CO2 layer, and you start to see a black film developing. Or sometimes there are other colors, and that actually starts to reduce your efficiency. By using the electric water and some of the catalysts that we've created with using the gold and the platinum and such, you completely eliminate CO2 soaking. This unit runs better after 6 months than it does when it's brand new. Okay, because it runs better the longer it goes. Unlike most systems which suffer from CO2 soaking and a couple of other ailments that start to clog up their plates. So that's what you use frequencies for usually, is to strip that off. But I don't like the use of frequencies so much as I like the use of catalysts.
So that for a very simple system with very minimal catalyst or maintenance, that's quite a remarkable system.
The catalyst never really wears out, because we have the reservoirs that feed the catalyst back to the machine. Okay, so the catalyst never really wears out. The catalyst is always being recycled.
How often are you measuring the ratio or the concentration?
Once I put it in there, I don't usually. It doesn't really change.
So,
well, that's one thing that I will talk about when we start multiplying the minerals, is that when you use heavy acids or heavy alkalis, that for some reason that actually inhibits the process of multiplication and what we want to do over here. So we'll get into that a little bit more.
And by the way, if other people in the audience have questions that you want to ask, you think ought to be brought up at any point, feel free.
So like I said, this is the system. This is a basic system, and this type of system can run for incredible amounts of time. I put them on semi trucks. I put them on oil wells. I put them on standalone generators, that type of thing, because they're bomb-proof and they're very, very sturdy. So I like this is what we call, this is a dry cell. This you'll see is a wet cell, and this is a hybrid. It's got plates that are pressed together with a spacer in between, and so there's not a lot of room for water to get, or there's not a lot of ease of communication for water in there, but it slowly seeps and fills up all the cells. So that's kind of a hybrid system. It's lined with Teflon inside there to make certain that it's very, very heat resistant. Oh, there's one thing I really want to stress. If you're building a hydrogen device, hydrogen boils at 210 degrees, or water boils at 210 degrees. Inside of a hydrogen device, water boils at 140 degrees. Okay? It's a completely different environment inside there. So if your device is running hotter than 140, 150 degrees, you're actually boiling water and creating steam, and that's very dangerous, especially for an engine. Not so dangerous for a torch, that's okay, but for an engine, that's really bad. So be aware of that. That's why these also serve as safety systems to keep any steam from getting into the engine. So that's a little preparatory part. Remember, 2.35 volts per cell, 1/4 amp per square inch, and that is a pretty good round number to remember as you're building your devices.
Where'd you come up with those numbers?
Those I studied a long time with Bob Boyce, and I read a huge amount by George Wiseman and Ewell Brown, and those were the numbers that I found fit the criteria the best. And they've proven out over and over again. If you go over current, you'll crystallize your plates and stop producing gas. You may get a lot of gas, it won't be great gas, and over time the plates will stop producing. So your efficiency on your hydrogen device will go down. If you go over voltage, your plates will start falling apart.
Okay.
Oh, we bought so many devices. We bought round devices, and my family and I, and we played with a lot of different devices, and we found every single which way to fail. I mean, we got a tube device. They were using baking soda as the catalyst. We ran that thing like they said we could, but at a peak output, we ran it for about 4 or 5, maybe a week, but I think it was about 4 or 5 days. Pulled that thing apart, it fell in half because the plates had just eaten themselves to death. Baking soda, not a good way to go. In my opinion, I don't know anybody else. Maybe somebody else has a fantastic experience with it, but the long term, in harsh conditions, this seems to be the best way to go. Moving right along, one of my fields of research is health and longevity, as we've already mentioned with the different waters that my family and I have created. And so I wanted to find a way to deliver beneficial elements and such to the body more quickly and effectively. And I turned to my hydrogen research because Ewell Brown, when he was doing his work, he could send divers down, supplied with a supply of Brown's gas. He could send divers down twice as deep and come up 2 or 3 times as fast as a regular diver, because the hydrogen and oxygen was going into the cells. The oxygen was giving the needed oxygen to the tissues, and then the oxygen and hydrogen was recombining as water and not producing any toxic gases in the body, so they could come up faster without any bends. So, and then there were several gentlemen, as a matter of fact, some of the people here have actually done work with healing and curing of chronic disease, or working with at least relieving chronic diseases using Brown's gas. And I'd read many of these accounts, and so I was very, very excited. So I studied and created a device that allows me to use no sodium hydroxide at all, and instead use just either the etheric elements or the ormus elements that I work with, and breathe those substances. And that's what this turned out to be. And you put water in with a little reservoir. The gas comes out, and you can breathe that directly. And excuse me, oh boy howdy, it's good stuff. Gets rid of headaches. There's talk of actually people putting plastic bags over sprained wrists and such, and healing the injuries, even stroke victims. So there's a lot we could go pretty deep into that, but we don't. This is not the forum. But what I noticed was when I added an alchemical fluid to this system right here, the alchemical fluid that was very, very difficult to make and took a long time to produce, suddenly was multiplying. It got thicker and darker in the reservoir. I said, wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening. I've worked for years to try and figure out a faster way to make this. So and when I analyzed it, I realized, oh look, it's actually concentrating. It's actually more concentrated than when I started. So at that point, I remembered some experiments that were done and realized that it's possible that I was actually multiplying chemical compounds and multiplying elements. So should I tell that story, or should we just go? Let's just go on with this here.
Yeah, they can go to part one because we talked about that in part one, didn't we?
Yes, that's right, we did.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Okay.
Okay, so let me show you what I did here. Now, what you actually see here is a violation of the rules that I already laid down. But that's because we're not using sodium hydroxide. We're using less plates, and we actually end up giving it a little bit more. Voltage. What you see here is a conventional. I know it's very dirty, but that's good elements that you see in there. I drained out most of it. You can see some of the red stuff down there. Excuse me. This was all completely clear when I started, and it's a system that uses no sodium hydroxide because, as I said, sodium hydroxide interferes with the process. And I know people seeing the video are saying, well, look at that red stuff. He's disintegrating plates. I'm not disintegrating plates. I have measured all of these things with micrometers, and I'm not disintegrating the plates at all. I'm actually multiplying and dropping out elements. And so what you see here is essentially this system, a little bit different voltage current ratios. This is my first system that I ran off of a solar panel. Literally, what you're seeing here, this device generates about 20 liters an hour using, is my solar panel in here?
Hydrogen an hour?
20 liters of hydrogen an hour using only a little $45 solar panel from Harbor Freight. Okay?
How many square feet is it?
Probably about 4.5, 5.
Okay.
4.5, 5 square feet. It's not even their big, powerful one. This is just an experiment I did, and that I haven't measured the output from when I hooked it up to the big panels, but the little solar panel is generating about 20 liters an hour, so about a third of a liter a minute. And so we have a fuel that we can use to cook our food, heat our houses. It's being generated by the sun. And at the same time, it's creating a byproduct of an actual sellable element of gold and platinum and stuff like that. So that's the basics of it. Now, what you have to do, you can't see it in there very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this here. Essentially, you put together a set of stainless steel plates with spacers. Here I use an O-ring. Or actually, it's a quad ring. It gives me twice as much surface area of contact than an O-ring, but that's another story. Here I use an O-ring. In here, I use a strip here and a strip here and allow free communication of water down and up. So that way, the minerals and elements that are multiplied can fall down, and the gas from the hydrogen and oxygen gas can rise. And so it's completely unobstructed. In this system, it's contained so that, of course, it doesn't leak and the gas comes out the top. So that's basically what I have inside there.
Like a wet cell.
What's that?
Like a wet cell.
It is a wet cell. This is what is considered a wet cell system. We're not looking for high efficiency.
Could you point out in here, you said there's basically along each side. Could you point out where those are? It looks like you have those spacers right about there and right about there.
Yeah, there's some spacers right about there. And once again, I violated the rules. I didn't go an 1/8 inch of spacing. I literally just used I'm so ashamed. I used zip ties. I cut zip ties and used those as the spacers because they're a little bit less than a 1/16 of an inch. See, in this system, we're putting our energy into making the elements, and we're not concerned about super high efficiency like with my hydrogen device. So we can play with some of the variables.
And also you want to play with more heat as you
What's
have
that?
less neutrals.
Say again?
You want to play with more heat as you have less neutrals.
Yes, I have less neutrals, so as he said, more heat is generated and more, there's a little bit different current ratio. So in this one, here's the numbers. I've got a positive and a negative plate, and 1, 2, 3, 4 neutrals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells, 5 cells on each side, so for a total of 10 cells. And I run about 16 volts for 3 amps maximum into here with a power supply. And what that does is that drops out such a huge amount of elements. Like I said, all the water was completely clear when I started, and the plates are not disintegrating. I take this apart routinely, and every month, every couple weeks or so, measure the plates. I'm not disintegrating the plates. I'm actually dropping out elements out of the water.
Now you talked about you've got some kind of a gasket or sealing.
This is my favorite sealing material. I have tried so many. I have tried EPDM, Buna, nitrile. My favorite sealing material is a Teflon rope. It's very similar to the Teflon tape you put on threads to when you thread something in, just like I used here to thread this in place. Yeah, the Teflon tape there, but it's actually been spun into a long cord, and that is one of the best sealing materials ever.
And it's called Teflon rope?
Teflon rope, some places call it Teflon gasket material. Mm-hmm. It's somewhat expensive. I was a little bit loath to open this, but I figured, hey, you know what, we need to do it.
You said it was about $20 for that piece right there.
Not really. It's probably closer to 10. Yeah, it'd be probably between $10 and $12. So I'm just.
And how often are you opening this up if you're using it for?
You don't have to open it up if you're using it. You don't have to open it up. I open it up because I'm in the experimenting phase. I wanted to check and see the plates. I wanted to see what was going on in here.
But if you're doing alchemy and you're dropping stuff out, don't you need to get in there to access it?
That's what this is for. This is bottom access. You just the elements collect in here. I just undo that, drain them off into a gallon jug, and pour another gallon jug in and start over. So I don't have to open this at all once it's sealed up.
These connections here, what's that about?
Oh, that's just okay. This is the gas out. As gas accumulates in here, gas comes out here and escapes, and this is the water in. This can be hooked up to a reservoir. I just connected it to itself to transport here.
Okay, so this connection is not the way you want to do it in a completed unit. You do this for the sake of transport.
Yeah, for transport. Usually this thing connects to a reservoir. It goes from here and here to a reservoir and then goes out. I just put this together so I could carry it here and didn't have something flopping around to transport. But you could do it this way. You could just unscrew that, pour out your elements, plug it back in, and pour your water in. Or pour your water in through here and it would fill up.
Okay.
So it's very simple, very user-friendly. Once it's sealed, you don't have to take it apart. Once it's sealed, it's fine. I take it apart because I'm in the experimental phase. I want to test what it looks like in here. It's got jostled around a little bit. I'm gonna build a much stronger unit that is actually epoxied together. So here in the future, but
maybe you can. These look like off-the-shelf components here. What are you using here?
Okay, these are. This is CPVC. Do not use PVC pipe. PVC pipe goes up to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. CPVC can go up to 210, 220. If you're running that hot, there's something wrong. But I'm a huge fan of safety. I've burned things up. I've blown things up on purpose, not because I like explosions, but
most of the time, right?
Yeah, there was one that one time. We won't talk about that. I wanted to see what this can handle. So I've detonated units like that while I've been holding them. And they go, and they're fine. So that's why I like this CPVC. You can't put enough hydrogen in here with your stainless steel plates in order to really damage it. This is an off-the-shelf CPVC lid. They're about $100. I just happen to have one laying around, so you can do many things. You could put two of these on the ends and bolt them together. You could drop this unit down into a 5-gallon bucket. Don't really recommend it, but you could drop that down into a 5-gallon bucket and hook up a hose off of it. It doesn't really matter. I'm a huge fan of safety, so I like the indestructible nature of this.
Do you have the dimensions on these diameters, just for the people who want a recipe?
Okay. This is an 8-inch nominal CPVC pipe. That means that it's about 8.5 on the outside and 7 3/4, just under 8 on the inside.
7/8.
What's that?
7 7/8.
7 7/8. Thank you.
Do you have to worry about the cutting, getting rid of any magnetism or whatever that might build
Well,
up,
this is all
static
plastic.
electricity?
Are you talking about the metal plates?
Right.
In the metal plates, what you see here are sheared stainless steel plates. And I haven't had to deal with magnetism issues like you would with a conventional Joe cell. If you're doing concentric stainless steel tubes, you do have to deal with magnetism issues, which is very easy to just simply use a torch, heat them up, and take out the magnetism. But with stainless steel plates, you just shear them. Don't laser cut them. If you laser cut them, it's a little more expensive than shearing. If you can find a shearer, it's a good way to go. I have lots of stainless steel plates if people want to buy them. Pretty cheap too. I have lots of 6x6 plates. So you just stack them together and hold them apart with spacers, and then I've got a piece of plastic that I had laying around the shop and just clamped it together. So pretty simple.
Since this is going to be cut into several segments, let's go ahead and mention your domain name, Alchemical.
Alchemicalhydrogen.com and ancienttech.com.
And tech is TEK.
TEK, thank you, yes. Ancient Tech. Oh, and the other thing that I use to hold this on is plumbing goop that you can find from at Home Depot.
Both of them? So you put plumbing goop on one?
Down.
Okay.
And then you form your gasket, and it's actually completely round when you start here.
And this is where it overlaps right here. And you get a good seal where it overlaps.
Very good, yeah, very good seal. Usually I'll fold it over the top. That got moved a little bit, and see it's still sealed. Anyway, so that's why I love this stuff. And then I just use a stainless steel plate that I clamp down on top. This has some grooves in it to guide the Teflon where I want it to go. As you can see, the grooves all in there as well, just to seal it up very well. On that
this
system,
was machined here?
Yes, it's machined out. I cut it. Actually, it was cut for one of those, and I just said, you know what? I'll just throw it on here.
What kind of material is this?
This is 304 stainless. Since this isn't being used as an electrolysis section, or excuse me, in the electrolysis section, you can use 304 versus 316, and it's about a third the price, or 2/3 the price. What's that?
No. Your plate's at 316, though, right?
My plates are 316.
Right.
Yes, my plates are 316.
So let me ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
If you take one neutral of each cell, the voltage of the cell will go up, right? How you came with 16 volts and 4 neutrals for each cell? Out of experimenting, trial and error.
Yeah, experimenting to find the best voltage to drop this out.
So if I put three neutrals only, it will generate more heat.
It will generate more heat,
What about
but
elements?
you've got you're putting a lot of power in there.
But what about elements?
I don't know. We're still in the experimental phase here. Okay, this system. People have been probably transmuting elements more than they realize, but this system I've only been working with for like 4 months. So this is so actually transmuting elements and seeing all the ramifications. It's wide open right now. So I encourage people to experiment. I encourage people to build these devices. Maybe get some gold and platinum from Ancient Tech and seed it and start playing with it. Somebody asked me in the elevator about using seawater, and like the gentleman did in the experiment or in their work electrolyze the Great Salt Lake water, and they get a lot of gold out from it. I would be very careful with that because you're producing a lot of chlorine gas. Very, very dangerous stuff. You definitely don't want to be running that into an engine. You want to be washing that out. So I'd be very careful using seawater, but spring water, Ormus water, if anybody's familiar with Ormus, distilled water. If you're going to spike it, if you're going to put some gold in there, if you're going to put some platinum, iridium, something like that.
Is this purely scientific? In other words, whatever elements are in the water are going to be multiplied, or is there some intention so that human thought and intention and you can create or diminish depending on intentionality, or is it completely scientific?
That is a very good question. I haven't seen intention be involved in this yet. But it's still a fairly young field, so we might see more of that in the future. So intention, I do a little prayer meditation each day. I get up every morning with the sun and or before the sun, and do some prayer meditation and do some sun gazing. And I put the intention into the day that the highest and best is going to happen. Highest and best is not always what we want, okay? Highest and best is what the universe has in store for us. It's the path that God has for us. However you want to put it, the highest and best may not be what we want, but it doesn't mean that it always happens, okay? But so I try and hold that intention all day, and I try to. It's difficult to work actually in my shop with a bad attitude and such, based off of our experience that you've actually talked about before with your thoughts and your emotions and our etheric energy devices. So maybe as we experiment more, we'll see, maybe meditation is the best way to go. I mean, I've seen some amazing things done by people all praying and meditating in unison around a bowl of water and manifesting reality outside of themselves. So really amazing stuff. So maybe we'll see more of that as more people work on this. Mm-hmm. It's like the microchip manufacturers. The computer manufacturers discovered that computers work faster when the person operating them is in a good mood. So instead of encouraging everybody to be in a good mood, they started working on ways to shield their microprocessors from emotions. Okay? Seems kind of counterproductive to me because, hey, what if we all got in a really, really good space and we can create supercomputers? Hey, what an interesting idea. So, and I believe, anyway, that's esoteric. We won't need to go there.
Okay, we've talked about materials. Is there any reason to explain the materials
This is
in the bottom?
my base. This is just a base that I use to hold this up off of the
it could be anything, basically.
It could be anything, basically. As a matter of fact, I had originally envisioned this thing flipped upside down, and I wanted to call it my little R2 unit. Yes.
Vernon, when you put materials in there,
Yes.
what's the maximum amount of increase that you've seen when you put in like one part of gold that you would see maybe, you mentioned earlier 15, 16 times, or how high do you think that could go to?
I don't know yet. We've seen at least 13 times multiplication. As soon as we we know that the elements are being multiplied because we've measured it with certain detection devices. We take it away, we've still got the same amount that we started with, and more are over here, and we can detect the elements that are over here, but we don't know exactly how much.
Is it
So we've seen at least 13 times.
Have you tried to put it into recirculation?
Put it back in?
Yeah, and recirculate.
No, I have not yet. And that's definitely on the list of things to do.
Is it conceivable that you could have a continuous flowing of your of the things that you're making? You seed it with gold, for example, and then you run it and you pull it off at a certain rate, and you just keep pulling it off, and it's being created from the hydrogen and oxygen gas and the alchemical process.
Well, that's essentially what we're seeing here. You pull it off over here.
Isn't that an infinite scenario, not a 13-fold?
Well, I guess I see what you're saying. It would be infinite if you just let it keep on going. Okay, I do turn this off. I do. The sun goes down, and everything condenses, and I take it apart every once in a while. So I don't know the exact numbers yet. And as we quantify this, we're in the advanced theoretical stage here. Now we need to quantify the numbers. We need to start figuring out exactly what's happening here, so we can get ratios of hydrogen, oxygen, elements generated. And there's a lot of experimentation to be done. But this is fairly new. This is just 4 or 5 months old, this particular deal. Systems.
We've seen a duplication of organics, versus inorganics in there.
That is a very interesting question, and I can't answer it without telling a really different story. So I'm going to have to pass on that one. I apologize.
So the short answer is yes?
What's that?
The short answer is yes?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody familiar with Leeds Skalman?
Yeah.
He wrote an interesting little pamphlet. It was called Animal, Vegetable, and Mineral Life. And everybody thinks it's a typo because it's animal life and vegetable life, and then we've got minerals. But then I started getting really deep into alchemy. Let me demystify alchemy really quick. Alchemy is the study of finding the seed of life of something, anything, whether it be an element or a mineral, whether it be gold or platinum or whatever. Alchemy is discovering the seed of life of something, finding the soil in which it's going to grow, and putting them together and cultivating them. So whether that means I'm going to find the seed of life of gold and put it together in the soil that it's going to grow in, let's say tin, and then cultivating and letting it grow with heat and multiplying my gold, that's one element of alchemy. Whether that's an idea in a fertile mind and putting it into, and cultivating it with proper thoughts, proper energy, and directed action, and creating a new reality, that's alchemy. So what Leeds Skalman was talking about is saying, we're going to find the seed of life of a mineral. We're going to find what it grows in, and that's what the pamphlet's about. He was talking about magnetic fields and making it grow. So, and that pamphlet was all about alchemy, but most people think it's just kind of the ramblings of a very eccentric person. So, the short answer is yes. The short answer is we have seen organic life grow in here. How that is measured is a little bit, it's harder to quantify. So that's my reticence there.
Have we gone through all the materials and the specs on the design? Are we ready to talk about?
Let me just show real quick here. This is a very, I like this way of putting power into it. This is a bolt, or excuse me, this is a pipe threaded fitting through the wall of the vessel. And I put a bolt in here, a stainless steel bolt, and welded it on the end so that I get a completely sealed threaded insert that I can put electricity in and come out on the inside. So that's something that's really important. I struggled for a very long time to figure out how to put an electrode through with washers and such that aren't going to break down over time and that are not going to suffer from the expansion and contraction as this thing heats up and cools off. This is the best system that I've found to do it. The only other system is to use that I like is to use this as an electrode, which I do on the other machines. But this is a little bit different way to do it. So I like this way. You put a bolt through and you weld it on, and then thread that in place, and then you've got a contact inside that you can run your electricity off of.
And so this is just a regular connection here, just a nut.
This is a stainless steel bolt that's run through, and I just put on the wires with two bolts and tighten them down together. The reason why I put this glue in place there is because I have experienced over time these bolts, these nuts that have been threaded onto the bolt. Over time, as they heat up and cool off, they can loosen up, and then you get a little tiny spark in there, and you got hydrogen right here. Little tiny spark from the contacts, and boom. So that's why I put the glue in place there, so that it can't wiggle loose and spark.
What kind of glue?
That's once again the plumbing goop. That's great stuff. I use tubes and tubes of that.
And that's what is called commercially plumbing goop?
Yes, that's what it's called.
Okay.
It's called
Same thing to.
It's in the purple. It's in the purple tube. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't use it for sealing completely. You cannot use it to just seal the lid in place. I've tried that. Doesn't work. You have to use the Teflon. You have to use something to hold it pressurized like this, bolted together, pressure holding it together. You cannot just use a solvent to hold it unless you're using like here. This is just solvented on the pipe onto the lid, or the cap rather. But that's 4 inches of solvent, and it's really strong. So that's good. But an inch of solvent, or half an inch of solvent, or half an inch of glue won't hold things together. You have to seal it with compression.
What about these fittings right here?
These are conventional CPVC fittings. You buy them at Walmart, or Home Depot.
With Teflon fittings?
I use regular Teflon pipe tape to thread that in place. And they have a maximum. Their maximum heat is about 180 degrees. But if you're running 180 degrees here, something's wrong. So you don't want to go that high.
What about the fitting on the bottom?
The fitting on the bottom is just the same deal. It's just gone out sideways.
Any reasons for the diameter that you're using there? It looks like it's about a 1/4 inch, or almost half inch.
Yeah, half inch. I think these are. I think it's 3/4 inch NPT. It's just stuff I had laying around.
Okay.
I could use smaller. I'll dispel. It's not really a myth, but it's a conception that says you need huge diameters to run your gas through. You can run 20 liters a minute through a 1/4 inch pipe, and I haven't seen any significant drop, or I haven't seen any significant difference between using a large pipe or a small pipe to run your hydrogen through. So I don't think you need a huge pipe. In the beginning, I was using 1 inch diameter hose to run my hydrogen to the engines and such, because I thought that I needed to. Then I started doing some experiments, because that's kind of what I was told. So I started doing some experiments, and I proved out that I didn't need to. I could use a 1/4 or 3/8 inch diameter hose like you see here, and do it just fine. So.
Do you have your own spectrograph?
What's that?
Do you have your own spectrograph?
I have a friend who developed a detection technology that is without par. Okay, it is amazing technology. He can scan the moon. Okay, he has revolutionized shipwreck discoveries. You can get on a boat, tune in for whatever he's looking for, whether it be gold or jewels from a Spanish galleon or something like that, and they can drive their boat to it, send divers down, and they're right on every time. So, and it's a really beautiful little detection technology. This little device about yay big, and they detected thorium and cesium landing in the mountains of Utah from Fukushima. So, yeah, that was kind of freaky.
So
That
pretty-
little box with the angle of the divining rods go with it?
I don't think he uses divining rods anymore.
Fitzgerald?
No.
Okay.
So basically dialing any element on the periodic chart?
Any element on the planet. He gave it to the police department in Salt Lake City. They dial in the chemical compound of methamphetamine, drive to a meth lab. So he sent 2 of them to Iraq. They're not quite as user-friendly as the military would like to have, so they're not asking for more. But basically, guys that were well-trained on them and were very good with using them could tell from a distance of 5 miles where an improvised explosive device was located. And they could tell the guys, you're going to go forward 300 yards and you're going to go to your right, and you'll find it there buried 2 feet underground, that type of thing. So the technology is without par. Yeah, it's amazing stuff. It's like having a tricorder from Star Trek. Okay,
Yeah, I met somebody down in the Mount Pleasant, Utah area who's passed away now who had developed a technology like that.
Not Robert. Was it Robert?
No,
Okay.
I can't remember his name.
All right.
It's in my address book. He passed away about 2 years ago.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, should we talk now about we've talked about assembly and what's involved. What about operation, how to run it?
Operating these is fairly simple. You want to put, of course, you put voltage in at some point. Now, what I believe from the experiments and the things that I've seen so far, what I believe is that a pulsed frequency device will drop out the elements that are there. A DC device will multiply the elements that you've seeded with. I could be completely wrong on this, and I'm challenging people to try and figure out, the nature of this. I mean, here we are, Nikola Tesla. We're going to throw the AC motor out there, and how many people can find new applications for it? Here we are. We've got a hydrogen element dropper outer multiplier, and go out and find out the ramifications about it, because this is brand new and anyone can do it. I mean, as you can see, it's not difficult. Input voltage across, and I just use usually I use solar panels. Sometimes I'll hook it up to my DC power supply. I'll plug DC power into here so I can let it run for a week straight instead of on and off every day.
And you get the same result. It doesn't care where the DC's come from.
Okay. Does not care. It's just the solar panel's free. So you put it on there, and
the reason I ask that is because we might think it's all the same by our measurement detection, but there could be other things going on that we're not aware of. Radiant energy flows over the wires, not through them, for example.
That's right.
And
if you want something to flow, you call a plumber, not an electrician. Energy flows around it, not through it. You're absolutely right. We have actually discovered a distinct difference between a solar panel voltage and a lead acid battery voltage and a lithium ion voltage. Don't ask me to describe it. It's a little bit outside of where I'm comfortable talking about, because it moves into the marriage of esoteric energies and science. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Very basic. Mm-hmm. Pro and con against which one?
I am not a fan of lithium ion. I do not like it. I can go into the environmental impacts of it. You are less impacting the environment by driving a Hummer than you are by driving a Prius. Okay, because of the lithium ion and the environmental impact of making the batteries.
And disposing of the batteries.
And disposing of the batteries. Thank you, yes.
But are they supposed to be recyclable?
What's that?
They're supposed to be recyclable.
Yes, but just making them is incredibly harmful.
The mining of them?
Mining of it, the manufacturing process, the whole thing.
But if you're replicating the minerals, the lithium and the ion using this, then what?
Well, then we're looking at we have the ability now to mine the ocean. We have the ability now to manufacture the elements that we need. All we need is water and energy and a seed. So the seed of life, finding where it will grow and encouraging it to do so. So perhaps then things will change. But we don't like the lithium ion. There's aluminum in lithium ion battery systems. This is going to get really esoteric, so if you guys don't like it on the video, go ahead and fast forward now. But there was a woman making the rounds in the Prophecy Club about 20 years ago that could kill rats using carbon dioxide gas. She demonstrated this many times on stage. She could kill rats using carbon dioxide gas, lay her hands over them, and bring them back to life. Many people witnessed this. She just blessed them and brought them back to life. There's one criteria. There could not be any aluminum within 100 feet of where she was working. If there was, she couldn't bring them back to life. One time, they thought they found all the aluminum in the area that she was demonstrating this, and she was praying, and they weren't coming back to life. She was praying and blessing them, and they found one little strip of aluminum on a label underneath a table. And she grabbed the rats, ran out into the field, knelt down and prayed over them, and they all came back to life. So I'm not a fan of aluminum. Now, I'm not that crazy. I'm not crazy, but that intense about it, because hey, I'm not bringing rats back to life. But aluminum, when I did my research into the Bible code, aluminum was one of the few metals that had absolute injunctions against using. There were a couple of the noble metals too, actually. Osmium was really bad, and which one? I want to say it wasn't. I want to say ruthenium, but I'm not certain. But when I studied that, what's that?
Well, go ahead. I was just going to ask what would be an aluminum substitute since you're using aluminum in this setting.
I'm not using any aluminum.
Aren't you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Not a single thing.
Water now?
What's that?
What do they put in our water now? Fluoride. Where do they get the fluoride from aluminum?
Yeah, fluoride. Fluoride is a toxic industrial byproduct, and the men that handle the fluoride barrels are wearing full hazmat gear until they pour it into the pipe that feeds the city, and then everything's fine. Fluoride is also how the Germans, how a handful of German soldiers, maybe 10 or 13 German soldiers, could keep 1,000 people in a prison camp completely calm and relaxed and just usher them towards the gas chambers because they'd been giving them so much fluoride, the people couldn't, rise up. So
back to
I'm going to step off the pedestal of the soapbox now.
the DC power.
DC power going in here. Any type you want to play with.
And it doesn't matter
solar panels.
which is positive, which is negative.
In this condition, no, it doesn't. I set this up to be positive and this up to be negative, and I've got my negative pole in the center and my positive on the edges, and that's all.
Is there
so it
any
doesn't really
reason
matter.
to go one way or the other?
It only matters if you're going to be in an area where you could brush up, where the edge of your machine could brush up against the ground. So let's say you were building something like this and you're putting it into a car. You'd want to position your positive and your negative so that it didn't, so that it couldn't brush, so that your positive could not brush up against the frame of your vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that's the only criteria, but that's more of a installation concern rather than a design concern. Right. So I like this way. It's personal preference, but I like how this generates gas. There are subtle differences, but that takes like about a year of working with the gas to start to see the subtle differences, and different people resonate with different setups. So this is the way I like.
Is there any entrainment or not? That's not the word I'm looking for. Conditioning involved in this?
Not involved with this. There's conditioning with this, and this is a conditioning process, and I can describe that real quick. Conditioning the plates in a system like this, you power it with a little bit over current, a little bit more energy than you would normally power, and you cannot power it with pulsed DC. But you condition the plates by running them with a whole lot of sodium hydroxide and some gold and some electric water, and you let the water run. You let the water boil away. You don't replenish it. You let it all run out. And what that does is it puts a nice layer of, you can't see it on these, but it puts a nice conditioning layer on the plate. And then you do it again.
Layer of
catalyst. Put a nice conditioned layer of catalyst. Essentially what you're doing is you're conditioning the first molecule, the first atoms of each plate. You're conditioning them with a material that's going to encourage the production of hydrogen. It's going to take it to the point of separation, and then your electricity pushes it over. So that's what we're going on here. I know that your system works a little bit differently using
the place you have to be sand
but
before.
That's how you condition this. That's a secret, okay? Secret. Boy, I'm no good at keeping. Actually, I'm really good at
You actually
secrets,
sand the
but-
place first, right?
What's that?
You sand the place first.
Do you
You
sand
can
the plates?
I do sand the plate. Actually, I don't sand the plates anymore. Let me show you what I do real
That's
quick.
kind of like anodizing aluminum. You're creating a hard
Because
surface or a different
the
surface
metal
on.
comes.
Yeah, let me tell you real quick here. What I just described was letting the water run out, during the conditioning process instead of replenishing it and keeping it full. That is something that took me a lot of years to learn because I would condition it. It'd take me a week to properly condition a plate. The protocols are on, actually, they're on PesWiki right now in a lot of Bob Boyce's work. So, but when I learned that if you let the water level drop over as it's running, and then when you fill it back up, it's going to run even better. But that's only with my gold catalyst. That's not with regular sodium hydroxide. Follow the normal conditioning procedures that Bob laid out with sodium hydroxide, and you'll be fine. But anyway, what I do now, instead of sanding, because I've been working in production levels, I have to find the fastest way to do this. So when I was doing these, I was running about 3 minutes of proper sanding and conditioning, or proper sanding and prepping of each plate. Okay, and that was just way too slow when you're doing a 120 plate system or something like that. Just takes way too long. So what I actually found was that if I took a wire brush, I don't know if you can see that on the camera.
Yeah, you can.
Took a wire brush on my drill motor.
It actually shows up better on the camera than it does.
Really? Oh, nice. I took a wire brush on my drill motor and just... And what's interesting is this is it looks very similar to the flower of life diagrams they found in Egypt. So I really like this way of conditioning the plates, and I do that to all my plates. And I can do a plate in about 20, 30 seconds, completely scratched or prepped for the box. So, and then I like the pattern so much I did all my ends with it too. So, anyway, I think you can even see it on that one there.
Yeah.
Too.
Just for aesthetics.
One more question on that.
Yes.
I've asked you before, I didn't understand.
Okay.
Does that go in water? Or
This does not go in
just
water.
like it is?
This is what we call a dry cell. The water is only inside. And inside the circle, okay? So you see the circle
Right,
here.
I remember now.
So we're going to put water in here. There's little holes drilled in the bottom of the plates, and that's what communicates the water to the center. And then the hydrogen is generated, comes out the holes in the top, and escapes there. So this is what we call a dry cell.
When you say hydrogen, you're talking hydroxy?
Hydrogen and oxygen, excuse me.
Hydroxy,
Brown's gas, whatever you want to call it. There's a conflict between the Brownsians and the Rhodians, and they're saying, no, it should be called Brown's gas, no, it should be called Rhodes gas, no, it should be called, there's super gas now and whatnot. Rhodes pioneered the work, started it out, much as you see me doing this here. Brown took the work and quantified it. There's actually things that I can't say about Brown and his work with the hydrogen because it's not mine to give away. It's somebody else fed it to me under confidentiality. But let me just say that what I talked about in my lecture about water, about the different parts of water, is so important for proper Brown's gas research. That there are different parts of water. If you distill a gallon jug into 4 quarts, every quart will have its own characteristics, and you want to use certain quarts. You actually want to use the first 2 quarts that come off, and the last 2 for an alchemist are what we call fixed. You don't want to use the last 2 quarts. You want to use the first 2 quarts. Use the last 2 quarts for watering your plants or something.
To give a plug
Distill
for
it. You say 2 gallons of water, you distill it from you get it from a nice stream and distill it. What do you mean by distill it?
Okay, before we answer that question,
Boil it and pull it off?
Hold
can
on.
you pause for a second, please? Just to give a plug for where people can get those DVDs of your presentation, go to teslatech.info, and those will be available shortly where you can purchase a DVD of your presentation. And I would recommend doing it. It was a fascinating presentation you gave yesterday.
Thank you. I'm really excited because this is the first time in 3 years that they've actually got a copy of my presentation. For the last, it was the last 3 years. Somehow the copy of my lecture was destroyed. Either the sound was completely garbled, it was unintelligible, or the video just didn't show up. I find that very ironic, very interesting.
So they've already produced it?
This one they know. As a matter of fact, they set up a special camera in there. It was completely independent of everything else,
backup.
recording it, just to make certain that everything worked out right. Okay, your question is, how do you distill water? You can distill water. You can get there's a stainless steel distiller, well, plastic shell on the outside, stainless steel on the inside. You can distill water, any type of water, but if you distill reverse osmosis water, it'll be much cleaner on your distiller unit. So you just pour the water in, it distills off. And like I said, for Brown's gas work, you want to take the first 2 quarts that come off, okay? Brown had a little bit different way of separating his water, which, like I said, I can't talk about it because I have to honor my covenant of silence. No, I have to honor my, the confidentiality. So, anyway, so the first 2 quarts of water are what you want to use in all these systems. The other quarts you want to add to your gardens or water your plants with, or because they're what an alchemist would call fixed. They're harder to separate. The first 2 are very volatile, and they're much more attuned to what we have here. So, that said,
So you're using the first 2 quarts coming from the distiller to run in this process?
yes, yeah.
And so you
actually for this process you could throw in spring water.
and that's good. I mean, you would think, well, you're going to use the first 2, but what you're saying is don't use the 3rd, 4th, and 5th in your batch. That goes on the garden.
That's right.
Only use the first 2, and if you want to make 6 quarts, you're going to have to do this 3 times to get the first 2 quarts off of each process.
That's
correct?
right. That's
Okay.
right. And that was one of the things that really launched some of my hydrogen work. When I realized that the water itself that I was using was very important. Not all distilled water is created equal.
So would you say that this alchemical process you've discovered that's a crucial component or something that is a make or break?
This will work without it.
Okay.
I mean, all hydrogen will work without it. You can just use distilled water. You just use whatever you want to. In this one, you can throw in spring water. You can throw in salt ocean water if you're really adventurous. But what I found to make really good gas and to have really dynamic and powerful effects, if you use the first 2 quarts of water, the first 2 sections of water, you will find a more powerful gas. You'll find it separates more easily, that type of thing.
So it's a preference, not a requirement.
Someday it may be a preference, because I'll tell you what, how many people are, someday it may be a requirement, not a preference, because how many people are remediating nuclear waste like Brown did? Is there anybody? People have tried it and they can't do it. But if you use this other system, you can.
Really?
Yeah.
I lost that.
Because Brown did not talk about where he was getting his water.
Okay.
Brown did not talk about the type of water he was using. That was his secret.
So let's get back into the procedure of running this thing. We've talked about the preparation of the water. We talked about the hooking up of the DC. What are the considerations? Is there a pump involved in running it?
Voltages you want to run, if you set it up the way I've done it, you run a 12-volt solar panel. And no panels are 12 volts. They're actually like 8 or 16, and that's fine. Just hook up the solar panel, run it to it. If you're running this, like this over here, you're going to daisy chain your solar panels together and generate 120 volts and put it into it. But for this one, a 12-volt, this design that I've created here, a 12-volt solar panel, I'm not really concerned about the amperage. It'll take as much as it wants, and you won't overload your panel. And just have at it. So 12 volts or 18 volts or whatever it's called. If you don't get up to 20 volts, because that's or 24, excuse me, a 24 volt panel, just stick with the regular panels that you can use to charge batteries. An RV solar panel or a couple of them work together, that's fine. So, or a DC power supply. A lot of generators have DC power supplies now. You just hook up, click, click from the generator, and away you go.
Now,
a layperson, how much are you filling this all the way to the top with water?
Well,
And how are you telling how far to fill it up?
see my little line there? I'm not filling it all the way up. I'm not filling it up to these electrodes. Basically, I just measured how much water was going to fill in here. I figured about 1.5 gallons, and 1.5 gallons, it's a little bit high. Next time I'll use about 1.25 gallons. So that the water is below the plates, but it doesn't really matter as long as you're not filling it all the way up and allowing this electrode to interact with that electrode, because then you're going to lose a lot of your power here, and you want to focus your power here.
Now, what about how do you maintain the level? Because aren't you having? Is there a continuous flow of water through here, or is it a batch process?
When you hook it up to the reservoir over here, you can actually see the level that you're at, okay? When I've got it like this, I just know that I'm going to run it for, I'm just going to pour in 1.5 gallons and let it go. But if you have a reservoir over here, you can actually raise and lower the reservoir, and you'll see the line of the water, and you just adjust just as you see fit. You really want the water to be right about the top of the plates, maybe just a little bit lower, and that's fine. So with the reservoir, it makes it very easy. So that's a good thing.
So give us a step process. Number one, you put the water. Number two, you put the lid on.
Okay. Number one, you take your water, whatever your water you're going to use, whether it's going to be spring water, if you're gonna be brave and try salt lake water or ocean water.
Your water.
Or my water, my elements. Mix that all up together. In a system like this, you're looking at about 1.5 gallons, maybe 1.25 gallons. Like I said, you can put this in a 5-gallon bucket, and that's really easy. Okay, my plates are sitting about 6 inches off the bottom. I know that I'm going to put in 2.5 gallons. Okay, but measure out your water, find out exactly how much you want, pour that in there, and then actually you want to seal this first, because you can add your water here. So you want to seal this up, because this is not going to seal properly if it gets wet. And when you're working around and trying to get all these bolts, that's why actually they're all unequal. So that it's easier to put them on. It's like, okay, this one, and then that one, and that one, and then you just suck them down.
How much time do you have to work with that plumber's? How long does it set up?
You want to be sealing it up within about within less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
I like to give it about 5 minutes on a cool day. I won't worry about it too much, but on a hot day, I want it sealed up within 5 minutes.
Okay.
So.
And that includes putting the nuts on?
Yep. Well, you put it in place, and then you just start tightening down the nuts. Depending on your mechanism of sealing, I actually toyed with the idea of putting a clamp on there, clamping it down, and then tightening down the nuts, and that works too. But you put it in place, and that's the first stage, and then you tighten down your nuts, and you want all of that done within 10 minutes.
Okay. And then let's talk about filling up the reservoir. Since we don't have the reservoir to demonstrate here, can we use something just as a visual?
Okay, so we're here,
And the
this
reservoir-
hose was going to go to the bottom, and this hose would go to the top.
Let's for the earlier portion where we're describing the components. Let's describe the reservoir.
Okay. Actually, this is the reservoir. I should have thought of that. This is the reservoir right here. So, as you can see, the reservoir is actually higher than the highest level of this hydrogen device. And there's different ways to play with this, and I don't want to go into the minutiae of that because it really comes down to personal preference. But as you can see, filling up this device will bring you to right about here. Okay? And so you can actually see how much water you have in your hydrogen device by the level in your reservoir. Okay? And so you open that up, pour it in, fill it up to there. It equalizes, it drops down, you fill it up again, and you're fine.
Any preferences on size of reservoir?
No, it's totally personal preference. These things are $8 a piece. So I've said, hey, can't argue with that. I'm just going to buy them and put them in place. It's $8, so they're pretty cheap and not difficult to use.
And using the same reservoir on this system over here?
Yep, same deal.
Okay,
Because I had a lot of them laying around.
okay.
This is a safety bubbler. You're not going to be running an engine off of this thing. Well, maybe you are. If you're running an engine off of this thing, you want to run it through a safety bubbler.
Right. So let's stick with this scenario of
Yeah.
doing,
Okay.
let's now pretend like this is your reservoir
Okay.
for demonstration purposes.
So we're going to run this bottom hose to the bottom of this reservoir, run the top hose to the top of this reservoir, and we're going to look and see where the level of our plates are compared to where it corresponds to on this reservoir, okay? And so we're going to fill up the reservoir to the level that is indicated by where the plates are.
So you're pouring the water into the reservoir when
Yes, you're
filling
pouring
it
the
up.
water into the reservoir. And you pour the water down into the reservoir, and this will equalize pretty quickly. So basically, as fast as you can pour it in, it's going to flow in there and equalize. And when you reach the proper level, that's where you stop. You can play around with it,
You
but
probably
it's
might want to
all
put a
personal
mark on
preference.
the outside of this just to be sure.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
And then also you're going to want to have some way to fasten your reservoir in relation to the main tank so that they're not moving back and forth. And
Right. On my in my video presentation, I had a picture of my entire safety setup on the wall, and part of that was the reservoir.
yeah,
And I feed this unit with that same reservoir that I feed all my other hydrogen units. So they're all daisy chained together. So it's pretty simple.
okay.
So that's the setup, and I'm assuming that people are just going to let this hydrogen boil off into the air. If you're inside, you want to run a hose to the outside. If you are letting this sit outside, you're fine. You can bubble it off through a safety bubbler or something. Run it to a generator. Whatever your preference is, it doesn't really matter.
What if you were in the alchemical process, you're experimenting, and you've got some kind of a toxic substance that you're replicating, then you would probably, are you going to have any of that coming out in the...
What you want is if you're playing with that stuff, it's going to be pretty advanced, but if you're playing with that stuff, you want to have multiple washes of water. Now, this container right here is the safety bubbler and the wash, okay? And what happens is the gas bubbles through there, and any particulates, any residual from the machine is going to collect in this second bubbler. And what you want, if you're playing with toxic stuff, you want multiple stages of those. So by the time you get down here, your gas is completely clean. And you want them to be tall, too. I use a Harvell clear PVC pipes, put caps on the end and bubble gas through it, because I can actually see, I'm a very visual person, I can actually see the bubbles and I can see the gas escaping. I saw a $50,000 hydrogen prototype destroyed in 10 minutes because he had no visual feedback. Okay? He relied entirely upon computer gizmos and gadgets to tell him what was going on, and one of them failed. It was like a China syndrome. A 25-cent piece failed, and a $50,000 prototype was destroyed after 10 minutes. I'm a very big fan of visual feedback. One bubbler would have told him that something was wrong, but he was relying on a computer. So visual feedback. On top of that, and as I mentioned in my lecture, if you got a long column of water and you're bubbling hydrogen through it, have fun with it. Put a rodent coil around it. See what happens. We're dealing with practically an electrolytic gas here.
Yes.
Try energizing it with high frequency energies and such. There's one guy that was playing with this back in the 60s, and he had a little separator as the most inefficient thing on the face of the planet, but then he'd run it between two 8-inch plates, very similar to my lids there. He ran it between two 8-inch plates that were separated about 2 inches apart, that had a high voltage corona in the center of it, not enough spark to ignite it, but enough energy to turn that hydrogen gas into deuterium, and he was running his car on it. So play with the columns, shine lasers through it, shine ultraviolet lasers through it, do different stuff like that, and you'll start to see the quality of gas change. You'll start to see the manifestation. I swear someday we're going to see somebody running a torch and they're going to start depositing gold on a piece of steel, and that'll be really cool. So anyway, that's the setup. If you're working with working with elements like that, you want to have multiple stages just to make certain that whatever you escape off into the air or whatever you bleed off into the air is going to be clean.
What about as you're running this, are you expecting the water level to drop at it?
It's not going to drop super fast since we're only producing, like I said, this one's going 20 liters an hour. Your expansion ratio is at least 1,800 to 1. So 1,800 liters is going to take a little while to go through. And that's burning through 1 gallon of water. But if you're bleeding it off and taking your minerals out that you're multiplying, then you just keep on adding water in proportion to the minerals or the water that you've taken out.
Well, let's talk about harvesting minerals.
Okay.
And you've got the setup where you've got the reservoir, and where are the minerals showing up, and how do you pull them out?
The minerals are showing up in the water that comes out of here and collects in your reservoir. And what you're going to do, there's a number of different ways to work with that. I would suggest everybody get the book Recovery and Process of Precious Metals by Bill Amen, because that is the definitive work, on how to recover elements from any situation, whether it be an ore or a deposit or whatever you're working with. Little bit of chemistry.
From an oil well.
What's that?
Brine from
From an oil well. Oh, boy, howdy. You missed it yesterday. I talked about my oil well experience there. Al.
I didn't get back in time. I didn't get down in time to hear about it. But we processed water from 3 oil wells, stripper wells. The brine was considered so strong, but it was hazardous waste, and it had to be diluted before it could be re-injected.
Really?
And
Wow.
the wells produced maybe 2 barrels a week, and 98 barrels of brine.
Brine. Did you ever do an analysis on the brine content?
I got I was able to smelt out of the. We did your process.
Okay.
And the waste, the precipitate we worked with, and I got 8 ounces of silver out of 50 gallons.
8 ounces. Wow, that's good stuff. I love it. That's fantastic.
I may bring 10 gallons down to you.
Okay. Excellent. Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, but the same thing. It's a guy in Denver that's the leading gold smelter here, and
So you have to find a place to process it.
Exactly.
Did you use this process to just precipitate out and drop out the
Oh yeah,
metals?
we ran it. We were pulling 20 amps. We had an outdoor tank that we had the stuff in and the plates in, and it was a cone-shaped tank, so we could collect the precipitate out afterwards, and we would run it until the voltage went to zip, because the salts were all gone. Like you say, we collected the precipitate.
There you go.
Afterwards, and processed the precipitate after that. And how much gold? Well, in this particular, there was very little gold, and there was some platinum, but very little. But it was mostly silver in this particular brine solution.
Going back
Well, we got
to
another affirmation of what's going on here.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
I'm
dropping
sorry, I
out.
didn't
That's not the
take up
multiplying, but that's the dropping out. So there we go.
Yeah, exactly.
We're actually part of this, Al. You missed the first part. Is actually about multiplication of elements too.
Yes.
Which the hydrogen, oxygen, and the energy is happening quite abundantly.
I'd like to talk to you more about
Absolutely.
that, because that's what we were doing.
Okay.
We actually had some seed silver.
I see.
so here's another
This is a smart man. You're working with silver, not that stupid yellow metal.
Exactly. And
There you go.
there wasn't any trouble. We could send the silver off to
There you go.
Yeah.
And get it, we wound up with nuggets that were 82% silver, and the rest of it, and the Canadians just gave us back pure silver bars.
Nice.
Could you,
All right, moving on.
that's excellent, Al, thank you. And you don't mind us including that in our YouTube video here?
I see no reason why not.
Okay,
No,
all right.
it's interesting.
So back to this process here, could you walk through, kind of visually walk us through the process of doing a scenario where putting some kind of mineral in and you want to replicate it beginning to end, kind of just step by step?
So we're going to seal up our device completely. We're going to put the lid on and we're going to seal it down completely with our O-ring. And that's only important if you're actually capturing your hydrogen and running it. I mean, like I said, you can have this in a 5-gallon bucket, but I'm all about multi-purposing. I'm all about finding different ways. And so if we're boiling hydrogen off, there's no purpose to that unless we're actually using it. And like I said, this is what I'll heat my shop with this year during the winter. We seal it together. We put everything together. We prep our solution in a gallon or 2 gallons of water. Okay, we either use our high concentration spring water, our salt water if we're brave. We use our mineral water, electric water, whatever you want to concentrate. You prepare that over here, and you pour that into your reservoir. Okay, your reservoir, which is sitting, yay high, which is marked on the side to show where you want to fill it up to. You pour it in there, and the water equalizes, and then you cap your reservoir, just like on my machine over there. And you're going to take your electrodes, you're going to take your electricity, whether you're doing it from a generator, whether you're doing it from a solar panel, a windmill generator, something like that. If you're using a windmill generator, I encourage you to use a battery. I'm not a fan of batteries, but windmill generators go up and down and up and down. And so you want a kind of an equalized battery, or equalized voltage. Take that power and you plug it on here, positive, negative, and you just let it go. You just let it go. If you're collecting your hydrogen, you run it over to your hydrogen collector, a couple of 55-gallon drums or something like that, and you just watch the mineral content as it builds up in your reservoir. And in the reservoir here, it's going to get darker and darker as the element content builds up. And it looks like rust. It's not rust. Like I said, we're not disintegrating plates. We've measured the plates. We're not disintegrating.
And it's basically the same thing going on in this main chamber
Yes.
as is going on in the reservoir.
That's right. Because the two are connected in the way that we've described, the two are going to basically be equal. There may be a little bit more concentration in here that hasn't traveled over to your reservoir, but that's okay.
And when you say let it go, are you talking hours, days, or...
The concentration that you see here is probably about 24 hours worth of running from start to finish with a clear additive in the seed elements. 24 hours. So whether that's that was off of a solar panel, so that was about 3 days worth, maybe 4 days worth of sunlight.
Okay.
Because of the wind, because of the clouds and stuff like that. If you're running a pure DC source from a generator or something, it's going to be 24 hours, and you're going to see a significant deposit over there. I haven't felt impressed to just leave it there. Okay, I don't want it to short out my plates. I don't want it to build up so high. I want to drain it off and collect it. I've got barrels and barrels of it now. Got to figure out where to put it or where to take it.
So the matter of taking off that's going to be
very simple to do if you have a reservoir. It's even simpler if you have this configuration, because you just undo that and pour it into a gallon jug. If you have a reservoir, you just unhook it from where you're working and pour it out into a gallon jug, and then put it back in place and start again. So very simple way. See the video from Tesla Tech, my presentation. I've got a picture of it on the wall. A very simple system with the reservoir and the hydrogen column there, or the bubbling column there, and the flashback arrestor, and you can get a good visual of it. Why do I keep on forgetting about that? It looks just like that.
Yeah.
Very simple, just pour it out and away you go.
Okay.
You could even have a pigtail off of here with a little valve that allows you to open it, pour it out, and go with that. I always think about those things after I'm done building. I was like, oh, shoot, well, that would be really nice right there. But we don't have it, so we'll try this. So,
How much
anyway.
seed?
What's that?
How much seed? do you
I put what you see here started out, I've never added more. I started out with about a bottle of my electric water and about 3 or 4 ounces of the gold and platinum. Okay? And it just keeps on breeding, you know. But for I'd start out with heck, you could even, oh, that's an interesting idea. You could even just mix up a batch of black sands and put that and pour that in there. Of course, then you get a lot of iron oxide, and we don't want that. So never mind. Forget I said that. It's an experimental thing. We're gonna experiment and see. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that go out and buy colloidal silver and pour it in this thing. There you go.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Okay. Anyway, moving right along. What's that?
Exactly, yeah.
So remember my lesson that I mentioned earlier from alchemy. Silver, if you look at the Bible, silver is currency. Gold is never currency. Silver is currency. Gold is for ceremony and enlightenment. The silver metals are for making money. Alchemists are forbidden from using gold to make themselves wealthy. Nicholas Flamel made 2 batches of gold at like 4 or 5 pounds each. He gave it all away. Every bit of it. Built churches, built orphanages, built roads. He made silver and kept himself. He lived in the same house his parents gave him all his life. He never went, he did travel and study and learn, but he didn't elevate his status. Gold, to elevate your status, you will get a hammer from the universe. Everyone that's tried it has. So, platinum is a little bit different. You can sell platinum, but here's a little secret. Platinum makes an adamantine warrior. Stan Lee did not create the idea of adamantium with Wolverine's skeleton and stuff like that. Adamant is referenced in an 1820s alchemist Masonic handbook. They referenced it as the indestructible metal of the Atlantean alchemists. It was made from it's a composite of platinum and steel alloys that we cannot reproduce today. They have found rivets and coffins of these things made out of this stuff. Can't even reproduce it. It had to be alchemical. So anyway, they date back. They date back to before recorded history. So anyway,
You bleed off your gas and you say you put it in 55-gallon drum. Is there a specific gravity that with this gas where you can bleed it out?
Okay,
the tank?
my apologies. I had that in my lecture, but I had to skip over that because we were out of time. It's a 55-gallon drum with a 35-gallon drum inserted into it, and you fill it with the bottom cut out, and you fill it with water so that as the hydrogen fills it up, it pushes the 35-gallon drum up. And you have grounding straps in it. You have stainless steel strips inside and out riveted in place, and then grounding straps out there so no static can build up as you're doing it. That's how I store hydrogen and oxygen, excuse me. And that way I can use it without pressurizing it. If you pressurize Brown's gas, you will die. Over 100 psi, it's at any point over 100 psi, it can explode. I've seen it done up to 60 to inject into a turbocharger, but anything over 100 is fatally dangerous.
Does it lay around like propane?
That's outside the scope of this, but the longer you let it sit, the weaker it becomes. You have a question?
Yeah, talking about the intentions, and what about if you're creating these metals to finance research and development of clean energy sources?
This is a beautiful and noble purpose. The issue that
Repeat that.
What if you're using the metals that you're creating to finance research and development of clean energy sources or other noble, benevolent?
And that actually fits with alchemy. That's one of the purposes of alchemy. Fulcanelli
went to the researchers in France right before World War II who were trying to build the atomic bomb. And he said, what you're doing will destroy this planet. Alchemy is the only answer to stop it. And that's recorded in the scientific journals there. Fulcanelli is one of the greatest alchemists of Europe in the last century. But you can do that, and it's akin to Nicholas Flamel using his alchemical metal creations to fund more of his research into alchemy and immortality. So you can do that. The problem arises when you get people with egos involved, okay? A huge amount of money in research, let's say $100,000 is devoted to research into something, and I know this from personal experience, $5,000 of it goes to the researcher, and a huge amount of money goes to the administrative costs, okay? That's the same thing as profits. So you have to be very careful with the spirit of the people involved. Once you get gold involved, what is the quote? When gold is involved, the laws of God and men are set at naught. That was Nicholas Flamel. When gold is involved, the laws of God and men are set at naught.
Expound just a little bit.
What this means is, anybody heard of gold fever?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's the short term,
Yes.
gold fever.
The gold. People know that gold is the most important. Is a representation of a higher level of consciousness. Okay. But people that don't resonate at a higher level of consciousness see it as something that they want to obtain at any cost. And gold can be considered to be wealth, gold can be considered to be power. Usually gold is considered to be the yellow metal. And so they desire this, and they will do anything that it takes to obtain it and control it. And so, I mean, I've seen people shot not over the gold, but over the possibility of gold.
Exactly.
So what you have to do is you have to find people who will rise above that. It's like I was talking to somebody earlier. I have held a rock in my hand. It's a white rock, and it looks like nothing. And if I held a pound of that and a pound of gold in my hand, and an angel or one of you or somebody came up and said, throw one of them away, I'd throw away the gold in a heartbeat. Because the rock is an element that contains so much power for healing and energy and health and betterment of the world that the yellow metal will never be. Okay? Well, that it could be, but this is in its raw form, and we can use it so much better. So that's what I would do. So when you start dealing with research and development and making alchemical money for putting that towards research and development, you have to make certain that there's nobody skimming out of the coffer, there's no egos involved, that it's really the people that are working on it that absolutely need it that are getting it. Or you just start playing with silver and you're okay.
What about radioactive elements?
Radioactive elements are touchy. I haven't tried any of that because I don't like playing with radioactive elements. I will tell you this, I don't know if I've said it before in a lecture or not, but radioactivity, everything, conductivity, radioactivity, magnetism, comes down to crystal and geometrical structure. Nikola Tesla theorized that radioactivity was a manifestation of cosmic rays interacting with let's say, uranium. A radioactive rock radiation was the result of cosmic rays interacting with it, and if we could shield it properly, the radiation would go away. So a friend of his didn't agree with this at all and wanted to prove him wrong. About 20 years later, he had the opportunity, and they were drilling one of the deepest holes on the entire planet. I think they went down 18,000 feet, and this gentleman was involved with it. He wanted to prove Tesla wrong. And so he took a powerful radioactive sample and strapped a counter probe to it and lowered it down into this hole. When he got down about 16,000 feet, and the meter that they've got up there is just buzzing because it's right next to the sample. You get down 16,000 feet, and it turns off. What that shows is that the crystalline structure of the metal
is interacting with the rays that are hitting the planet. And when it got down to about 16,000 feet, it was no longer interacting with those rays anymore.
And it wasn't a matter of a cord getting disconnected.
No. When they pulled it back up, hit about, actually they got it back up and it stopped buzzing, and it took about 2 hours for that sample to start generating radiation again. So it has everything to do with energy coming in, which actually tells us something very interesting. If we can create, that's radio, that's energy coming out of that sample. If we can find the proper crystalline geometrical structure, Mike Waddell's actually working on this in a little bit different way. We can actually, we could actually create a plate or a substance with the proper crystalline structure that make all the energy we could ever want from cosmic radiation, cosmic rays. Okay, the day-night solar cell is an example of this. So just something to experiment with. So that's why we can remediate nuclear radiation with proper Brown's gas, not the weak stuff, but the good stuff. It changes the entire crystalline structure of the material so that it is no longer responding to the cosmic rays. We did an experiment with some cold electricity stuff that, we hooked up a cold electricity generator to a caduceus wand, and we ran it over some powerful alpha radiation samples, and all the radiation went away for about 30 minutes. So, and then it slowly came back. So there's different ways to do it. Radiation is not the boogeyman that the governments and the universities and highbrow people of the world would like us to believe it is. It's dangerous, don't get me wrong, but you can get rid of it in many different ways, but that's another story entirely. I'm sorry I digress a lot.
Let's summarize. I've got 7 minutes left on my battery. I've got more on my tape, but in this setting, since it'll be hard to get back into the setting, let's go ahead and wrap it up, kind of describing the process and the mechanism, and give us a take-home lesson.
What we are doing is we are utilizing a hydrogen electrolysis cell, just like this. Well, wet cell versus dry cell, but same principle. We're using a hydrogen electrolysis cell. We are seeding it with elements. We use the hydrogen and oxygen that comes off for whatever purposes we want, whether it be power or heat generation. And our byproduct that's going to collect in the bottom as the more we run is elements that we seed it with. And what we are looking at is the ability to take hydrogen and oxygen, imprint a template on them, and order the energy into physical reality. Literally, electricity becoming physical reality. And if we want to, debate numbers, I'll just throw this out there. In 1 cubic centimeter of the vacuum, there exists enough energy to power the United States for an entire year. So if we are working with the implosion and the changes of hydrogen and oxygen that we experience in a hydrolysis cell, how much energy are we actually playing with from the vacuum? So that's what I'd like to leave you with.
Basically an elemental copy machine?
Elemental copy machine is a good way to put it. Powered by the motors of the universe. So there we go.
Any final questions from the audience before we...
Does it still act as a copier if you don't ignite the gas?
Oh, you don't have to ignite the gas. No, I'm not igniting any of this.
No, you're still storing it for future use.
Well, but that's over here in this system. I have just bled this off, just into the atmosphere.
Go ahead.
When you say salt water, would you say like salt seawater or just sodium chloride that we use as table salt?
Thank you for asking that. I would not recommend using straight salt water. I would only use seawater. I'm going to build an entirely different machine to use seawater in because I don't want to mess this one up. I like playing with it with all my other stuff. Only seawater, saltwater brine from oil wells, the Great Salt Lake water. Great Salt Lake is a fantastic source of very interesting elements. Never straight salt water. Salt water, you're going to pour off a huge amount
of chlorine gas and really bad stuff. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Any other final comments, questions?
Well, it's essentially what he says.
Go ahead, Al.
If you actually measure the amount of gas that comes off versus the number, the ounces of water that you're disassociating, you have far more hydrogen and oxygen than is in the ounce of water.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't even.
So the hydrogen and oxygen is also alchemical?
Hydrogen and oxygen, there are.
If on the back of your hand, if you do the calculations, you mentioned how much hydrogen you were getting off.
Uh-huh.
And you talked a little bit, he just said, well, there's not much water.
Right.
Not much water. If you do on the back of your hand, you can do the calculations.
Uh-huh.
How much is a mole of water in hydrogen and oxygen? It's well known. And then you can measure the hydrogen and oxygen that you have.
Yeah,
The electrolysis
I had
problem.
completely forgotten about that.
It's about 16 tons.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was the thing, it was Kanarev's articles about.
So is it possible that the electrolysis of the water is not necessarily the crucial ingredient, but that it sets us a context of copying that includes copying the water, the hydrogen and oxygen and whatever other elements are in the water?
More to support what he says, the Japanese nuclear physicist, and forgive me, I've forgotten his name, he was responsible for the nuclear regulatory agency in Japan. He ran their laboratory. He got talked into doing this, and so he ran the test. Took iron electrodes, just straight iron electrodes, 99.9 pure, and did exactly what you done, took the water, measured the amount of hydrogen and oxygen, and when he got far more than it was supposed, then they spent 3 or 4 pages in the article trying to say what was happening at the molecular level. When they got through, there was no conclusion. This is one of 3 or 4 different possible ways, but they. Go ahead. All right. So
Well, we're almost out of time. I'd like to finish that train, bring it back here real quick.
Please.
Water separates into steam at 1,800 to 1 volume. Okay, so 1 liter of water will create 1,800 liters of steam. Good Brown's gas will, and so we use that as a rule of thumb. And then that's where these figures come from, what we would expect to find. But good Brown's gas can produce much, much more volume than just the 1,800 to 1. So that's what we're saying. Where is that coming from? I completely forgot about that word.
exactly. It proves exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. So this device, as was mentioned earlier, this device produces about 20 liters of gas an hour. And so it's not a huge volume, but over time, 20 liters of gas an hour for an 8-hour sunny day, definitely enough gas to cook meals and maybe even heat a house if you're, I'm going to use it to heat my shop this summer or this winter. So there are many facets of this and many applications, and I encourage everybody to jump in feet first and experiment with it and see where it goes, because as we've seen from Al and other people that have talked this week and there are other experiments, this is being proved out over and over again. Now it's time to actually focus on it and see where we can take it, because water is the future of this planet. If we don't find ways to more effectively utilize our water, we're not going to make it. So thank you very much for all your time and everything. Thanks for being here and the questions.